I've had on hundreds and hundreds of people in this room sharing their stories on my podcast. And among all those interviews, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours of content, all to tell somebody else's story. That's not going to change. We're going to continue to do that. But there's some things about me that you probably don't know. And I want to begin that process of peeling back the layers. You see that picture right there? That was my brain when I was in college. Why I had that done, we'll get into that in a moment. But the first thing that a doctor said after looking at that brain was, she said to me, "How much heroin have you done?" And in a very defensive like response, I said, "Never, never." And I hadn't, and I never will. And in retrospect, the most that I've ever done is when I was in college, I had a weed brownie once. And I don't think that falls under the category of badassery. But it was that kind of brain that led me to the help that I so badly needed. And it was that scan that I got all because of an intervention that took place. It wasn't atypical from one that you might see on TLC or one of these channels where you have the intervention and the family comes together. It's that act of a calling for help, and the family tries to do what they can to make that possible. And so this happened to me when I was in college, and the family came around and they knew that I was in a dark place. Let's get to why I was in a dark place. When I was 12 years old, my dad was diagnosed with cancer. And he was a fighter of all fighters. Because he was a fighter, he lived a lot longer than the doctors said he would live. But it was almost 5 years, more so, at least 4 of those 5 years, where between the ages of 12 and 16, I would come back from school and have no idea the state of my father or whether or not he would be alive when I got back from school. And they tell you you're supposed to act like an adolescent because that's the developmental stage that I was in. It's okay, you're 12, 13 years old, 14, you're going into puberty. What are you supposed to do? Act rebellious, go on dates, whatever you're supposed to do. I did none of that. And why would I do any of that when I have somebody dying at home? How selfish it would be. At least that's how I felt. If I were to do something for myself when everything was about keeping the man who I love so much alive. A man who wanted to be there for his son and daughter's graduations, for the weddings, and he was not able to be there and will not be able to be there for any of those. A man who went through radiation only to be told where he had it done at MD Anderson that he's fine. A couple check-ins from time to time. You got it. We got it all. Head and neck cancer. To then it coming back and ravaging one of his eyes. To us as a family going up to UC Davis, and my dad wanted to get that eye taken out. So he had his eye taken out. Parts of his skull taken out. Parts of his neck were taken out. And we're seeing somebody who looked nothing like the dad that I once knew. This is the dad who I do everything for. This is the dad, a love between a father and a son that you just can't put into words. And the idea being that not only was that scan that I showed you something to do with obviously the tumultuous, turbulent like situation at home, where screaming and uncertainty were uttered in the house in panic on a regular basis, to my own issues of anxiety, debilitating OCD, panic attacks, major depression. These are all things that I had along with the unresolved grief. Because to be honest with you, when you have somebody in your life who has a terminal illness, you're grieving every day for that person, and you're putting yourself through that same emotional experience time and time again. All of these things happening at a time when you're supposed to go out and be a teenager and do teenager things. I didn't get to do any of that. I didn't really have an adolescence, a childhood. And so, with all that said, so much of me was about helping my dad. And so much of that time was forgetting my own problems. But you can only forget your problems for so long. Eventually, there is a breaking point, undeniably. I don't care how strong you think you are, because I thought I was strong. And some of the strongest people who you see doing amazing things oftentimes are those who have the most to hide as far as their own distress. But it's that time where I felt like my life was unraveling. What was life worth living? What was being a functioning adult, completing tasks, feeling emotions? I was numb, trying to protect myself from my dad's death and everything else I was dealing with. I had nothing going for me. And so that's why I had that intervention. One of the most traumatizing moments of my life is seeing those people who you love look at you as if you have to do something soon or the end is near. When that intervention ended, my mom had flown out to North Carolina where I went to college. And she was at one of those airport bookstores, and she was sifting through, and she saw a title of a book that caught her eye. And it was something to the tune of Change Your Brain, Change Your Life by Dr. Amen. And it was a New York Times bestseller. She read the whole thing front and back on the flight home back to California where she lived at the time. And she knew that this place, the Amen Clinic, as it was called, the foundation of the book, would be where her son would begin that healing process. See, my perception of the Amen Clinic is it's a place where when everything else has failed, you go there for that last hope of life. I had done lots of talk therapy, seen all sorts of different psychiatrists. They prescribe you drugs, this and that. I had done it all. But I was in a very dark place, a place that nobody wanted to be around because of everything that I had mentioned to you happening, from my own mental health issues to the added grief and the turmoil that caused, where I really did feel like I was shell-shocked, to the extent in which I did not cry about my dad's death until 7 years after he passed. All of this is to say, this place began the process of a life that I knew that I needed to live. And I go back to that scan that you saw. And it was on that scan that it was rolled out to me, all the things that were going wrong with me. And there's such a relief when a doctor, a psychiatrist that can look at those SPECT scans and can tell you what's going on, and you can see it. And you can see it. There's such a relief. You might not be able to have fixed anything or improved anything yet therapeutically, but if you can see it on a brain scan, That's the first wave of, okay, there's something that this is, and we're going to attack it, and we are going to work our way through this. What that one doctor said to me about the heroin, and if you looked at the top of the brain, there were these little holes there from a blood flow perspective. It's not actually physical holes in my brain, but places in the brain where they weren't functioning, where the holes that you saw. That is what they thought then was sleep apnea. And look, I knew I had snored. I knew that that was an issue, but I did not think that I had sleep apnea. And so soon thereafter, I went to a sleep study. And I went to the sleep study, and I am connected to 5 to 10 cords, and they're measuring everything from the heart rate to the oxygen levels and everything. And here I am, basically chained to this bed. And the folks there telling me, all right, calm down, go to sleep right now. It's not an easy thing to do. When to go to the bathroom, you have to have a nurse come in and rip off 7 cords. Needless to say, I didn't sleep that much, although they could start to see that, yes, there was sleep apnea. That validated what was seen on the scan. I went in again the next night. They did get enough data, and they said, yes, you have it. So what did I do? I thought, okay, let me go get my tonsils taken out. Let me do that. And I thought, okay, that would open up the air passageway. It didn't. I went in for a scan 11 years later, give or take. This is at the beginning of 2021. And the same issues were going on. I had not fixed the sleep apnea. I have now, thankfully, fixed the sleep apnea. But what I didn't realize is how debilitating it can be and how it can happen to anyone. It doesn't matter. Now, obviously, there's a stigma, oh, the person has to be severely overweight. That is not necessarily the case. Look, you can be whatever weight, but if you have an obstruction physiologically here in the neck, then you're just not breathing. And for the first 31 or so years of my life, I was not breathing when I was sleeping. Let me tell you what that does to your mental faculties. Okay. You're in a business, and for me, it's broadcasting, right? Everything is based upon being quick-witted, being fast on your feet, being creative, being a storyteller, and finding words to describe different things and being quick at it. What I didn't realize is that how compromised I was in that department. And how even doing all these things, from working in local television and radio and other things, how only a fraction of me was really operating, and I wasn't getting that full optimization level. The biggest issues for me were memory lapses. They were word recall. If you've ever had brain fog, then you know what I'm talking about. But if you've ever had brain fog for 31 or so years without it going away, then you know what it feels like. And you, with that said, make it very hard to be a successful broadcaster. So I had reached a certain state, and I felt like I had plateaued, because everything is about mental clarity and quick-wittedness and all of this in broadcasting. And when you don't have that, you're a shell of yourself, and there's only so much you can do. So I was inhibited from continuing the pursuit of growing and growing and growing. I finally got the right help for my sleep apnea, along with all the other things that I have described to you today. And after 2 years of this treatment, I finally have something I've never had in my life that most people take for granted. to be honest. And it's sharp cognition and mental clarity. These are the things that I only could dream of growing up. These are the things that I've only experienced within the last 2 months. It takes about 2 years to repair the brain from the damages of sleep apnea. That's what has been explained to me by doctors. And so we're in that 2-year range right now. And I've never felt this way from a broadcasting standpoint. If you were to tell me, look, none of this was scripted. All of this video that I'm showing you right now, all of this was off the top of the dome, as they say. There is no way I could have done any of this without it being written out or me stopping and starting or whatever, without the way my brain has felt in the last 2 months. It's exciting because there are some exciting things happening in my career, one thing of which I can't talk about right now, but one day I will be able to when I'm able to. But some exciting things are happening. And I don't think any of this would have happened unless I get into this state of mental clarity, which is exciting, as I said, but it's also frustrating because there's that fear of, whether it's an executive or whatever, somebody looking at potential roles to fill, and they pigeonhole you into a certain level of, okay, this person is this good and that's their ceiling, and that's just not good enough for us. Now, sometimes that probably works, but you can't judge me that way for all the reasons that I've just stated to you. You can call me a late bloomer, if you will, in the broadcast sense, but I'm enjoying something right now that I have never experienced before. Having worked out and worked on a lot of those issues that I was talking to you about earlier, coupled with the sleep apnea, I've never been in this state of my life. So I've never been able to fully show people what I am firmly capable of as a broadcaster. And so much of what you do as a broadcaster is, and it's not an easy thing to take into account, but it's the idea of you have to become of the understanding that you can only control what you can control. I say this because I'm in a place now that any of the other work that I had done a year ago or 6 months ago or whatever, honestly, is not indicative of what I'm able to do right now. And what I can't control is what people think of me, people in the business, how they evaluate my talent, what they think I can do. And that's hard for somebody who grew up wanting to control the situation of my father, wanting to be there every day, denying whatever I was going through to be there for him, trying to control. It's all false because you can't control. You try, but that idea is so applicable to right now because you can't control the situation I'm in now. All I can do is put out the best work and realize that, look, my time will come when that time is ready. And I have to come to peace with whatever that is whatever that is. Nothing can be forced. All I can do is my very best work. And it's the type and caliber of work that I've never experienced before. And it's only within the last 2 months because of the healing that has gone on. And it takes a long time to heal. All of these things mentioned. And on top of that, the sleep apnea. So it's sort of like a rebirth that I've gone through. And I wrap up in saying this. One of the hardest things in going through these processes is, and I don't say that this doesn't happen, this essentially happens to everybody, where at one point in their life, Now, dependent upon your situation, it can be more extreme than the other. But I guarantee you, every single one of you who have watched this video at one point in your life has felt a certain way or thought a certain thing that you believe that nobody would understand, and that you keep it within yourself and you internalize that. All that will do is obviously create that isolationist frame of mind, which is what haunted me for so many years. And now being able to be in a place where I can get that therapy and I can go to weekly group meetings on mental health, and I've made friends, new friends, exciting times. Like, these are things that have all come within the last couple of months. But the cognition in the working world, it's a special thing. And I don't know if people will be able to always see that in me because they might have a certain idea of what I was. But again, all I can control is what I can control. And I've come to peace with that. I've also come to peace with all the other struggles that I've had in my life. And as my dad was, he was a fighter. I'm a fighter. Every single one of us has a bit of a fighter inside of them. And I will always fight because I learned that from my father. And big part of this journey is just trying to make him proud. And there's been a lot of talk therapy about that phenomenon right there. All right. So that is how I'll wrap this thing up. I'll continue to talk more about what I've gone through and certain things of that nature. But it's nice to be able to share a piece of you that nobody really knows about, because you want to act like you have it all. You want to act like you've got it all together. What a fake mask that is. Because no matter how much you think you can keep it together, you're going to have that breaking point like I did. And even though it was a second brain scan after the first one in 2009, the next one in 2021, 2 years later, here I finally am in a place I've never been before with mental clarity that I've never experienced. And it's going to help me, unlike anything that I've ever put out work-wise. I have to come to the fact that my time is just starting. And it's never too late for you to have that rebirth too.